BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a couple quick announcements before we begin. I would like to say that we have made our series Zodiac Killer Hoax Theory open discussion into a playlist, and that will be available in the description box here. And we will also have a link to our most recent upload on John Wayne Gacy, the John Wayne Gacy Q&A session that we did, where I read off some of your questions and comments about John Wayne Gacy and a few other things just about serial killers in general. And we had a discussion about that, as well as reading an excerpt from the stage play Pogo. So that's a 3-act stage play about not only John Wayne Gacy, but also some of the story behind a particular painting that he did and how it affected certain people. And that is available in the description box as well. The best way you can support this channel is just by listening, never asking for any money. If you like what you hear, you can share it with your friends on social media. But most importantly, just have a listen. And once again, Zodiac Killer Hoax Theory open discussion and our John Wayne Gacy material is all available in the description box here. And the next announcement is that we will be doing something very big on the Zodiac Killer tomorrow. So, as always, you can like and subscribe and keep up with some of the true crime uploads, serial killer uploads that we do. But we also cover a variety of other subjects, like yesterday when we did our one on Patrick Henry and the ghost stories of Virginia. So all subjects are fair game here on this channel. Moving on to today's discussion, we're going to be going back to John Wayne Gacy because I have to give a shout out to YouTube user SuperStrike9, who recommended something that we read off during the Q&A. And what SuperStrike said was that the best depiction of John Wayne Gacy on film was from the movie To Catch a Killer that starred Brian Dennehy as John Wayne Gacy. And I checked and found that this movie was available online on YouTube for free. So I decided to watch it last night. And I have to say that perhaps I would agree that it was the best depiction of Gacy on film. And here on this one website, which is called, I'd never heard of this before, it's called Kids Search, the Encyclopedia for Kids. They have a list of movies about John Wayne Gacy. Great thing for children to have, right? But we'll say something very important about that in a second. First, they say that there are 4 major films about John Wayne Gacy. First is Gacy from 2003 that stars Mark Holton as Gacy himself. And then there's Dear Mr. Gacy with William Forsythe, To Catch a Killer with Brian Dennehy, and 8213 Gacy House, which I was talking about earlier this week. That is also available on YouTube for free on Horror Central. But that's more about some paranormal investigators are trying to get in touch with the spirit of John Wayne Gacy, and then they follow the events that happen. The other 3 films that we just mentioned are actually about Gacy's life. What I would say about To Catch a Killer, if you do want to watch this film, once again available online for free, it's really about the detectives, to catch a killer. It's about the detectives and their investigation and into the life of John Wayne Gacy. They're trying to learn about what is this guy doing? Is he responsible for these disappearances of boys and young men in the area? And the Gacy film from 2003, hence the title, is more of a biography talking about the life of John Wayne Gacy. Dear Mr. Gacy, we also discussed back in 2019. That film is told from the point of view of an individual named Jason Moss, who we're going to mention later this week on the channel in something else. And it's talking about somebody who's corresponding with John Wayne Gacy in prison. So all of these movies have something different to offer. But we don't really do traditional film review and discussions on this channel, film reviews and discussions, I should say, here on this channel. So if you haven't seen these movies yet, that's fine. You can keep listening. Let's just talk about John Wayne Gacy, because when I was watching this movie, To Catch a Killer, I don't think I ever saw a performance, someone depicting John Wayne Gacy on film, like Brian Dennehy did. He really captured the balance between the dark side and just the superficial facade. And my biggest takeaway from watching this film was that John Wayne Gacy probably went about life with a very superficial facade. He was a homosexual serial killer. He targeted boys and young men, and very famously, he murdered 33 people that we know of, and most of them, over 20 bodies, were buried in the crawl space under his house, and that he would, there would always be this bizarre smell, but Gacy often worked in a type of construction business, so it was very easy for him to recruit people over, asking them to do work for him, and then the additional job of putting down cement in the crawl space or doing some other repairs on that. So it was a way to lure boys and young men over to his house. And they even introduced the film like this to Catch a Killer, talking about how he's like talking to a guy saying, "Oh, you earn this much money here. Well, I'll pay you this much more. I'll pay you twice as much if you do this job for me." This was one of the ways in which he could get people back to his house. Some other bodies were discarded in a nearby river, actually. But the thing with John Wayne Gacy is the reason why I wanted to talk about this website, kidsearch.com, the encyclopedia for kids, is when we were doing our discussions on Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, I was listening to the All Be Gone in the Dark podcast version that's available here on YouTube, and there was a guest on that show who said that at one point in life, she saw the floor map of John Wayne Gacy's house, and she was around 12 or 13 years old when this happened. And she was looking at the locations of where each body was buried. I guess she found it in a library book or something like that. And she's around 12 or 13, and she's looking at this map of where all the bodies are buried in John Wayne Gacy's crawl space. Once again, more than 20 people. And what her response to that was, "I do not live in the world that my parents prepared me for." Like the lessons that she's being taught from not only her parents, but I'm sure the public school system. I certainly never heard about John Wayne Gacy or any of the serial killers in school. I mean, they talk to us about Charles Manson, but he's in a different category altogether. But she's just saying that the world is actually much crueler and a darker place than what the contemporary model of education leads you to believe it is. That was her takeaway from that. And that's why we really talked about serial killers a lot back in 2019 here on this channel, because at the time, I was just like, it's about trying to have a greater understanding of humanity. And if we want to learn about any subject, we can't censor ourselves and only learn these types of warm, fuzzy, and uplifting parts. Sometimes we have to explore this darker side of humanity and also learn about how how other people are created. What are the forces and factors that would drive somebody to become a serial killer? And the film To Catch a Killer, once again, is much more about the investigation trying to track down John Wayne Gacy. They didn't really get so much into his childhood. You can see that in the film Gacy from 2003, once again with Mark Holton playing John Wayne Gacy. And that one was much more about Gacy's relationship with his father, which was really bad, and the abuse that he suffered, both physical and emotional abuse, and the humiliation aspect, I believe, is something that is very important as well. But in the film To Catch a Killer, I think another thing that they truly captured was that John Wayne Gacy was someone who didn't have a complete sense of reality, and that definitely can come from the severe beatings that he had as a kid, as well as the humiliation aspect where almost someone is just trying to have like another personality takes over to shield the person from the traumas. And they really showed that on film, that it's almost as if when John Wayne Gacy would be in kill mode, a different persona is taking place. And BTK, Dennis Rader even talked about this. He called it Factor X, was almost like the driving force behind it. That was the driving force that pushed him to kill. Dexter, the fictional serial killer, even talks about the dark passenger, something very similar. With Gacy, I don't think it was exactly like a dark passenger, but rather when he is about to attack somebody and when he has one of his victims in a vulnerable place, this different persona would take over and his powerful dark side would come out and he would be much more vicious. But I think that it's very important to see a depiction of John Wayne Gacy where there's the dark side and then there's the lighter side, and it's just going back and forth all the time. And I really thought that Brian Dennehy captured that aspect of Gacy very well, because in the other Gacy films that I was mentioning, they didn't necessarily show that exact process. They might show one of the sides and not the other, or that they really highlighted the concept of compartmentalization, which we mentioned in our most recent Gacy upload, where he would be able to have destructive tendencies, but only be able to unleash them at certain times, or he has the ability to unleash them at certain times. It's not just like he's in dark kill mode all the time. These are very calm and calculated and methodical usages of these destructive tendencies. And this is one of the reasons why people want to learn about serial killers. They want to just find out, how is this person able to have these types of destructive tendencies, but not be like that all the time? And it's a rather fascinating question. And I think the first thing to say about that is that, number one, I mean, these are things that people often experience as the result of unhealed childhood traumas, that especially the relationship between parent and child, once again, John Wayne Gacy and his father, I mean, there was a very bad relationship there. And I often cite Dr. Julie Armstrong, who talked about serial killers, when she said that the serial killer wants people to feel afraid because they were afraid as a child. They want people to feel powerless because they felt powerless as a child. And with John Wayne Gacy, absolutely. When you hear the stories of the beatings that he received from his father, as well as the humiliation and all of that, and just never earning his respect and always being looked down upon him because like his father would think so poorly of him up until he became the manager of some KFC restaurants, as weird as that sounds, I definitely think that that was a driving force. But with Gacy, once again, it's not so much that just there's this light side and then there's this dark side. It's that it's just going back and forth all the time. It's just like light, then gray, then dark. But like it's just kind of always changing. And yes, he did have the ability to compartmentalize, and he had the ability to unleash his tendencies at very certain moments. But he would do this in public very frequently. And these are the original descriptions that I heard of John Wayne Gacy when I began looking into this type of material, is that he would act this way in public all the time. It's not that he only has this gentle facade and he's just this friendly Pogo the Clown type out in public, but I think that it's very important to recognize just how superficial that was. Trying to be the upstanding member of the community, that's how superficial it was. And when I was watching the movie To Catch a Killer, there's a particular scene when Gacy's talking to a police officer, and then he's saying just about, oh yeah, well, I got lots of things on my wall about how I support the police, and it sounded so superficial and dishonest. And I mean, I know it's a dramatization and these are actors playing characters, but the detectives see right through it. Now, to talk about a different serial killer, there's one named Paul Bernardo, who was the Scarborough rapist, and he worked with a partner named Carla Homolka. They were known as the Ken and Barbie killers. And Dr. Jordan Peterson talked about Paul Bernardo when he said that Paul Bernardo was interrogated by the police, and you could see his video on YouTube where he is being interrogated. And he just commands the situation like he's in a boardroom. And Peterson was actually speaking very highly of Paul Bernardo. And I watched that stuff, and I had a very similar response to what I just described about John Wayne Gacy. There's some guy who's putting on a superficial facade. He thinks he's some type of slimy, smooth talker, but in reality, he is fooling nobody. And that's the thing that I noticed about John Wayne Gacy in a lot of these media depictions, as well as watching the documentaries and listening to the media that we do have of him. He says, I'd have to put Gacy into that particular category, especially based on what we know now. But even when you're looking at people trying to learn about the situation, they think that Gacy is some type of a person who is in the category where he thinks he's this master persuader. He thinks he's this master manipulator. He thinks that he has everybody fooled, but in reality, he fools no one. Because Gacy would do a lot of things with the community. We mentioned dressing up as Pogo the Clown, very famously, right? But he would also be an active member in politics, and as well as we said, also supporting police fundraisers and such, hosting block parties. And he was doing all of these things mostly as a type of facade. But I mean, I think this is also about how the serial killer can show different sides, and they need to use their predatory instinct to say, all right, this is how I'm going to deceive people by doing this, that, and the other. But when the focus is actually on Gacy and people begin to suspect something, they can really recognize that this person is being very deceptive, or that there is something very bizarre about them, and he definitely didn't seem to have everybody fooled. But with Gacy, though, he definitely was at the top of, or the top or the bottom of Dr. Michael Stone's hierarchy of evil, level 22, if depending on your outlook on life, if you think that's the top or the bottom. Level 22, the psychopathic torture murderers, where he as much as, it's very similar to what Julie Armstrong said, this person wants people to feel pain and torture and terror because they were terrorized as a child. So they're trying to inflict torture on a person until they are dead. Psychopathic torture murderer, in the sense that they want to torture people to death. And I find it quite surprising that on Dr. Michael Stone's hierarchy of evil, and he used to host the show Most Evil, I'm not sure if it's still on, but it's a true crime show, and they would talk about how level 21 isn't even about murder. It's just about people who are torturing other people, just for the sake of torture, unleashing torture on people for a variety of reasons. And the psychopathic torture murderer is a person who is a grade above that or below, depending how you would view it, like level 21 to level 22, a grade that is more severe, we should say. And that's where John Wayne Gacy was, absolutely, at level 22, because he would lure people back to his house, he would try to get them drunk, and Gacy was a homosexual, and he would rape the people, he would rape the guys, and he would torture them, put the handcuffs on them. Every depiction of John Wayne Gacy that you will see on film, even when I read the stage play Pogo, he does the famous trick where he gets somebody stuck in handcuffs, and then they cannot get out. I mean, that's exactly this thing that we laid out, making somebody feel powerless because he felt powerless as a child. And about John Wayne Gacy, though, and his particular life, he was married multiple times, but we should say that he was married to Marilyn Myers in 1964, and they divorced in 1968. And he was married to Carol Huff in 1972, and they divorced in 1976. I think it's rather, I don't know if there's any significance to that, but you can see, if you heard those numbers, he was married for 4 years each of the times, 64 to 68, 4 years, 72 to 76, 4 years. And the only reason why I'm bringing that up is, if there's any significance to that, is perhaps that he could not hold down a marriage for very long. I mean, perhaps because he's a closeted homosexual who is murdering people, and he is not very good at living the double life. And that's what they really tried to show in the movie To Catch a Killer, is that Gacy would erupt in rage sometimes, but one of the things about John Wayne Gacy that is very rarely talked about, but you see this all the time on film, is he was a very large man, and he was much bigger than many of the victims that he was targeting, so he could very easily overpower the individuals. And they also really highlight this in the film Dear Mr. Gacy. Once again, not saying it word for word, but this is how Gacy would operate. And then, like, Gacy's beating up this guy in To Catch a Killer, just like flinging him around like a rag doll. It was very easy for him to overpower the victims that he was targeting. And I mean, that's also just showing that he would very much be aware of that. And even out in public, he would rough people up sometimes, and then at other times he would just kind of be in this gentle, like, confused, silly state. The bumbling oaf is often the term that I use to describe John Wayne Gacy. But I mean, if anything about these numbers here, about how he was married for 4 years, both times, and divorced after 4 years, I think that just shows that he cannot hold down a marriage because of all of the psychological baggage that he was carrying around. But it's also important to note that on the hair checklist to determine if somebody is a psychopath or not, the first one that we read off, when we read off the hair checklist on a previous upload that we talked about, which is available in our playlist BBOR Psychology here on this channel, it was that frequent marriages are a sign of psychopathy or sociopathy. Not frequent sexual partners, not frequent relationships, frequent marital partners, frequent marriages. And he was married twice, as you see here. And he also fathered a son and a daughter. But John Wayne Gacy is somebody who definitely was probably primarily more attracted to men than women, based on the way that he went about targeting men and younger boys and such. So when it comes to John Wayne Gacy, you can definitely see that either he was a born psychopath, or perhaps he became a sociopath very early on in life because of the child abuse that he received from his father, as well as perhaps, I mean, he probably didn't have a good relationship with his mother either. I really am starting to go down that pathway that when you know somebody who, or even, looking at your own life and such, when someone has a psychological issue about one of their parents, people often say he has father issues, she has father issues, he has mother issues, she has mother issues. I think that people often have issues with both their parents, and they just play out in different ways. I think that the majority of people who have had these types of Freudian influences in a negative way, it comes from both parents. And Dr. James Fallon also made the bold claim that the single greatest factor in determining about whether or not somebody becomes a serial killer is not genetics, it's not neurological functioning, it's child abuse. For the reasons that we've laid out, that they want to then unleash their revenge on the world, on society. The child who has not been loved by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. We once read off that proverb and quote, and I think that is very similar to about what was going on with Gacy. But Gacy would also have to have this type of superficial facade that he could use to deceive people, to act like a businessman, to act like a member of the community, to act like somebody who wants to do nice things for children, to act like somebody who wants to host parties and bring people over. But at the same time, I really think that the people that got close to John Wayne Gacy were probably not very well deceived. I mean, I think that Gacy was once again perhaps not the best persuasive personality. I think once the people got close to him, and this is purely my outsider take on the subject, is that they were probably very much aware that there's something wrong with this guy. I mean, they probably didn't suspect that he was a serial killer instantly, and many people would turn a blind eye to that because so many times we're just taught to accept differences, or that maybe, someone has a right to their own eccentricities, but then once people began to look a little bit more closely, they would see, hey, there's something majorly wrong with this guy. We don't necessarily know what, but he is emitting a certain dangerous vibe. And that's the big thing that what I got from John Wayne Gacy. I believe that he did have a very, very superficial facade, and people could see right through it once they began to put the focus on him and such. But what I would say, though, is that that's where we're going to have to leave it for now. And if you'd like to hear more about John Wayne Gacy and some more in-depth discussions that we've had about him here on this channel, we have our link to our upload on John Wayne Gacy in the description box, as well as the Zodiac Killer playlist for the Zodiac Hoax Theory open discussion, and we'll do something very big on the Zodiac Killer tomorrow. So, as always, you can hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, you're welcome to do so. And I will see you guys on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.